Hey, y'all.
Hey.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy New Year. I'm going to be the first to say it. I think up until February, I can still say it.
I'll take it. Although I do assume everyone who says that to me, I'm just like, did you just get off vacation or have I just not talked to you? So I have a little jealousy the later we get into February. Well, while everyone's trickling in, Brian said that he probably won't be able to attend today. I actually put this as the first agenda issue. He was asking me if I could take over recording duties from him. I don't think that's going to be a problem. I'll put everything on YouTube like normal. If anyone has any objections or would like to trade off responsibilities with me, that's fine. I assume this isn't anything anyone feels particularly strongly about. All right.
I know Ryan's on the way.
Okay.
Give him one more minute. He's probably restarting his browser because it was having issues.
Switching laptops. Going to a different room in the house.
I guess while we're waiting, if anybody does have any topics that they do want to cover, feel free to drop them in the doc, which is in the meeting invite. Well, rather than sticking around too long, we can go ahead and get started and just start walking through some of the highlights. Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy 2025. I think this is the first of 2025. Is that right, Russell?
Yeah, this is number
Yeah.
one.
So, being kind of a quiet holidays, but let's kick it off with highlights. Baco, I'm going to hand it to you, and maybe you can go run through the Python and Rust. Oh, Brian just joined. So maybe we can start with the Java highlights. Brian, I already welcomed everybody to 2025. So
sorry about that. I lost track of time going through and gathering up the highlights. So that was my bad. Yeah, awesome to see everything. I think we also missed the previous meeting, or at least I missed the previous meeting, but I think it was the holidays. So I think that there have been quite a few things. I was actually going back 6 weeks. So we've got a lot of stuff to cover in highlights, which is a good problem to have, especially over the holidays. So thank you all for contributing. This is amazing. So first off, I guess Hive runtime is now part of the Hive project itself, which is to say that we have removed the Hive runtime modules from Iceberg, and that is awesome. That takes care of it makes our tests run faster. It makes us more efficient. It also means that we're not continuously releasing code that never gets updated, which I think is a huge part of keeping the project healthy. Big thanks to Manu for pushing that through and getting alignment on the dev list around doing that. That's really, really cool. Awesome to see code removed in that quantity. So really cool. Also, we've added. Oh, I put this one on there too. We've added support to remove unused partition specs. This is one of those things that we've known about for a really long time. That partition specs, when you change them, just accumulate in table metadata. It's never really been that big of a problem, but it's really good for us to actually go and take care of those long-standing issues because it is making table metadata just larger than it needs to be. I think there's also an effort underway to remove schemas and actually have that happen. One thing that I would call out here is that this is now an option for snapshot expiration, which I think makes sense. We don't like to have a ton of APIs for doing individual things like, hey, go remove snapshots. So snapshot expiration, or sorry, go remove partition specs. Snapshot expiration, we kind of debated, but we do think it's the right time to do that. Because you're removing old versions of the table and potentially dropping old specs. So we've added it there, and I think it's really nice to have that done. So look for that if you're updating your table maintenance procedures. Next, we've added internal writers for Avro, which I think takes some explanation. So we have several different object models represented in the project. So when we read from Avro or Parquet or Orc, we can actually go to a Avro object model where you get like Avro records and classes. We also have a generic Iceberg object model that's used by the input formats. We have Spark, we have Flink. We have various ways of reading data into memory and how we represent it once it's there. We also have one that previously we used Avro for. So the first thing we did 6 years ago when building the project was make everything Avro classes so that we could read into, say, manifest file or data file classes. And we never really moved that over to when we built our own APIs for an in-memory object model. And now we actually have, so that's really cool. So thanks to Ajanta for implementing the internal object model for Avro. There's also one coming for Parquet that we're reviewing, so that's a very good thing. This may enable us in like 2.0 to perhaps remove some of our dependencies on Avro, if that's actually a big priority. It would be pretty nice to remove that, especially given that Avro is a lot of code that we don't actually need. Okay, the next thing is fast append now supports adding files with multiple partition specs, which is a great thing to see. Thanks, Anurag, for implementing that. And then there's a few different Spark things as well. So first of all, the long wait for action to rewrite table paths has been implemented and is there. And so thanks, Zihan, for implementing rewrite table path. Really great to see that in. I think people have been asking for it for a long time, and good to see it go through. Then a couple from Amog. We've updated the delete granularity in Spark 3.5 to file delete granularity, which should have better performance for everyone over the long term, and aligns with the next one, which is to implement v3 delete vector files in Spark. So file granularity is really important for actually maintaining deletes as we run merge statements and things like that. So rather than stacking up new deletes and needing an async operation to maintain them, that spoiler alert, no one ever runs. We're actually able to maintain them in line, just using a little bit more time every time we write, and do that efficiently. So this is a big step forward for the efficiency and the ability to actually use the row level deletes and row level formats. Last, I want to just highlight that Spark, as well as the generic object model, the internal object model, and other things, finally have support for default values that we spec'd out a while ago. This is part of the ongoing push to get all of the V3 features implemented. If you're interested in V3 and specifically like getting some small projects that are high priority to learn how to contribute, just reach out to PMC members about what you can do on V3. So there are things like implementing timestamp nano readers and writers, implementing the unknown data type, helping out with the variant testing and things like that. So there are a lot of good opportunities, and there are a lot of eyes on V3 right now because we're trying to get this out in the next couple of months. So please reach out if you're interested in picking up some of that work. I think those are excellent ways to get more involved. All right, and with that, I will hand it off to who did the Rust ones? Paco, is that you?
I can do it, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so for Rust, we have the 0.4 release out, so which is great. Like a lot of new stuff is in there. Please check out the link for the full overview. One of the things for doing the release was also the first release of the Iceberg core, which is like a Rust extension that we now also include in Iceberg. Right now, it's mostly for the bucketing transform, which is not available natively in Arrow. So yeah, we either have to do it in Python, which is extremely slow, or now we depend on Iceberg Rust, which gives like very deep performance, and we can do like the bucketing very efficiently. And thanks Farouk for working on the Puffin support. So first step is the parsing, and there are some subsequent PRs open on the Iceberg Rust repository. So if you're interested in reviewing, please jump in. For Iceberg, like I mentioned, we now have like the full set of partitioning functions in Iceberg. So that's really cool. We have the support for pluggable location providers. So if you have like some special requirements on how to structure your paths, this is all pluggable in Iceberg as well. We finally got like the dynamic overrides of partition. Was like a long awaited feature. So if you're interested in that as well, also we're gonna start. We got also someone working on the merging 2 stuff, so that's also very exciting, also very long awaited feature. We got support for multiple S3 regions. This is mostly because by Arrow, the file system doesn't really handle these redirects properly, so we have to do some magic on our end. And we did like the minor release of 0.8.1, which is great to get out. One thing I didn't add for Rust here in the list, but I think it's very worthwhile mentioning, is like that we're also starting to work on the metadata tables there. So that's also an exciting new step, and just getting like the feature completeness in Rust as well. Eduard, do you want to go?
Yep, I can do it. Unfortunately, I don't know the name of that author, but I added his GitHub handle. So thanks for adding any of the remaining table updates and requirements for the REST catalog. Thanks, Matt, for adding a catalog registry and improving APIs around catalog creation, which should make it much easier to add new catalog implementations. And as far as I know, Matt is currently also working on a SQL catalog. And also thanks to Kaushik for improving manifest scanning and general concurrency improvements in the Go client. I believe, Falco, you know more details about the C++.
Yeah,
One?
It's very exciting to see like what's going on in C++. I think like all the baseline in there. The most important stuff is like the discussion that you see in the link below. Like if you're interested in C++, please jump in. Initial goal was to have like more like a Puffin reader that can be shared across projects like Impala, and don't have to reblend all the stuff in each of the projects. But they're also like looking at like what's the scope there. So you can also do, for example, like Iceberg metadata deserialization, and also use that in other projects. So if you're interested, please jump in. A lot of discussion around the file layout and how to structure that, and what to reuse or whatnot. So I think that's it for the highlights.
Sorry, thank you. Next up, I skipped one highlight that I think should be up down below in the releases section, so I'm going to go ahead and move that. The 1.7.2 release. Who wants to jump in and talk about 1.7.2?
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
Together with JB, like we're preparing the 1.7.2 release. There was one pending bug reported this morning. I think it would be good to get that one in, and I think then we can start the RC. There's not a lot of additional activity on the mailing list, so if you find some bug between now and like today, you can report it on the mailing list. Otherwise, we'll just go ahead, I think, and just got the RC and get the whole thing rolling.
Sounds great. Thank you. And then 1.8, I wanted to, I think that, we've heard interest in getting a 1.8 release out. We need a release manager, and I think we have 2 volunteers, both Amog and Ajantha. So I wanted to see, who wants to do this, because we need to, I think, make sure that we have an RM identified to make it happen.
Yeah, sure. So I'm happy to volunteer, but if others want to, that's also cool. But yeah.
Yeah, I think Amog, you can take it up. Yeah.
Okay.
Next,
Cool.
Cool.
next one I will do it.
Can I just add, based on the discussion from the mailing list, it sounded like, JB was looking to, hit the scheduled release milestone for 1.9, and like Ajanta, if you want to, offer to do that one, I don't know if anybody has actually offered 1.9 yet, but that may actually better align with some of the work that you're doing. So it may be good just to kind of line that up, because that one will follow quickly from where we are with the 1.8. The 1.8, if you remember, was actually proposed for December because we had a number of items that we were trying to get in for 1.7 and didn't quite make the 1.7 release. And our general approach has always been like, don't tie features to releases. Let's make a cadence and make sure that we can release when it makes sense to make a release. So we shouldn't get too tied to like specific features on specific version numbers. But I would propose that. I don't know if you're okay with that, Ajanta, and I don't know if anybody else has already like offered up for the 1.9 release either.
I think that's a great idea, especially because I think we're going to want to follow up with 1.9. I know that I was hoping to get more of the variant stuff in, and that's, getting pushed from the 1.8 release. And I think, we also want to follow up with the partition stats once we take care of the Parquet discussion. So I think that's a good thing too.
There's actually a lot. Like I think the auth work is probably not going to quite be ready for the 1.8. I think there's still a couple PRs in the queue for that one. So there are a number of things, and we'll want to do a quick follow up with the 1.9. So
yeah, regarding variant, like is that like we're trying to target for like 1.9 rather than 1.8, right? Is that what you are saying?
I mean, I think that we want an RC of 1.8 in the next, week or two. And so like it probably just doesn't fit in that timeline.
Yeah.
I have quite a bit of code locally for reading from Parquet, but it doesn't have all the tests fleshed out and things like that. So I think, yeah, we'll probably want to get that out as soon as possible, but probably in the next release.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, possibly partition stats. Okay, so let's get to the main agenda topics. Number one, this will be quick. I noticed over the break that the Iceberg AWS module added a convenience library for just a utility method or two. That actually got into the core module because I think it was initially added to core, but then later reviews moved everything into the Iceberg AWS module. But the dependency was still in core, and we were actually shipping that dependency in various places, which is a really, really, really bad thing for Apache projects. So like this actually, might be a blocker for the 1.7.2 release because we have to have documentation for everything that we put into each module individually and anything that is bundled into our runtime bundles. So I just want to call out to everyone and make sure that we're constantly aware that it's very dangerous to the project, the foundation, and downstream projects and users to add libraries without proper license documentation. So please highlight this if you're reviewing something. Call it out, make sure the license documentation is correct. You can always ping me on Slack to have me come take a look at it. This is definitely a big thing that we don't want to mess up. And especially having like unknown dependencies leaking into our runtime modules, that's a big problem and will block releases. So just a quick PSA, please pay attention to that. And we need to keep that documentation up to date. I'm also wondering, I'm just going to throw this out there, if there's someone willing to write either a Gradle module or a Gradle task of some kind to basically dump all of the dependencies that we're putting into our runtime bundles into files that get validated, so that when the actual list of dependencies we're putting into runtime bundles changes, including transitive dependencies, whatever, we get a build failure. I think that would be a really great check to have. So that's probably something, if anyone has experience building Gradle modules or doing that sort of thing, I think that would be not only helpful for this project, but also for any project that ships those shaded dependencies. I don't know, Dan or Faco, who was first?
Faco, I think.
I didn't see your hand. Yeah, so I think this is a great point, Ryan. If you should be very serious about this. There was like an issue to like Brian Keller actually had like a script to generate these things, and we actually want to include this in the project. So maybe good just to revive that. I just added like the issue there. Can wrap it into a Gradle module, but I'm not a Gradle expert.
So I actually don't think that license documentation can be automated. I think that you can get a long way with automated documentation, and you could have a tool that says, here's a new library, here are the licenses or the license information I have for it. But what I've seen in other places is that you don't catch things like, a license is simply missing, or a license is unknown, a license is, category X. I've seen all of those issues recently on incubator projects, and I'm not sure that it is sufficient to do that. We can certainly automate a lot of it, but going and checking, does this license require anything to be added to notice? Does the project itself have a notice file that we need to copy into our notice? Anything like that is really those are kind of human things. Maybe we could automate it with AI in 5 years, but I don't think that's a thing right now. So I think baby steps is probably the right approach. I would love to see that tool that helps us just identify when something is not documented, so that we can just have a human go and take a look at it and update that documentation, and then update the file of things that are documented. Dan?
Yeah, I just want to add, I agree with what Ryan's saying. Brian's script is actually a great starting point to get traverse all the dependencies, because especially with some of the bundles, they're quite extensive. We went through this with the Kafka Connect module. It has just a huge number of dependencies, and then we were manually going through and validating all of those. In this particular case, it was not good, but as I mentioned in the chat, because of a very small technical detail, we're still in compliance. The prior releases are not necessarily bad. They don't violate any of the ASF license or notice things, but as a project, we've consistently maintained how we have actually produced our notice and license, so we should continue doing that. But we have missed this multiple times in the past, and it's just even with all the eyes on the project, when a new library is introduced, we seem to be missing this. So we need some sort of check. And I don't know if there's something that we can do that is automated, or if there are tools out there. So I think we're asking the community, is anybody familiar with something that we could use for this? We used Rev API for API changes. This is kind of a similar thing, but this is actually probably more important than the Rev API from the ASF perspective. So anybody who's willing to contribute, that would really be great.
Yeah, this is a great area to help out. So thank you, everyone, for listening to me on that. This is my little soapbox. All right, then we move on. I think we've got 2 more that should be fairly quick, and then larger changes to discuss. So number 1, recording responsibilities. I'm guessing this was Russell's item, since he's recording this. You're muted.
we brought this up a little bit right before you joined. Basically, Brian says he wouldn't be able to be here today, and he says in the future he probably isn't going to be able to devote time to setting up recordings and uploading to YouTube. So he was just going to transfer that to me. I wanted to make sure everyone was okay with that. But that's basically the plan.
Thank you.
The next one, I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware, Iceberg Summit is coming, April 8th in person, 9th virtual day. It's going to be the Hyatt Regency San Francisco, downtown Soma. You have to say all of that because apparently there's multiple Hyatt Regencies in San Francisco. It's that one and not the other one. The call for papers is open. We have a banner up on the main website as well, but please submit all the talks you have. Encourage everyone you know to submit talks. You know, let's get some great content for this. We're also working on setting up travel grants. So if you know of anyone who would like to attend but doesn't have the financial means to do so, or maybe is in school and doesn't have that capability either, keep an eye out for that. As soon as I get more information from Apache Community Development, we'll figure out how that gets set up.
Awesome, thank you. Next.
The next one's me too, sorry. Just a quick note. So we've been doing the implementation for lineage. In doing so, we realized that we really need to know the amount of added rows in a given snapshot to update our metadata.json. But currently that's only available as part of Snapshot summary. Take a look at the PR. It basically just says we're going to formally add added rows as a field to Snapshot that is required if row lineage is enabled. So we can basically say there is definitely this value here for row lineage. If you have questions on it, please check the PR or leave comments there on the mailing list thread that I also sent out.
Is this an area, so, I mean, I think when we've brought this up in the past, you know, spec changes that are small or minor, like we've still wanted to vote on it. Is this still something that people feel strongly about needing a vote for? Because to me, this seems like a, you know, addendum to something that we already approved. But I want to make sure that we're you know, doing what the community thinks is necessary, you know, even if it's amending something that's not yet adopted. Dan?
I still think it's worth a vote because I don't want to see like the whole point of doing the vote is just to like highlight to people that the spec is changing in some way and that we have something to refer back to. What we don't want to get into a situation of is having a PR that includes a spec change that has no visibility on the dev list. And it was like there was general agreement between people who were reviewing it and going through it, but there was no kind of like broader announcement that like something is changing that would allow people to, you know, see that it happened. That just causes conflict down the road when it's like, hey, why did this thing change? And you're hunting it down in like the comments of a PR. So I don't think that like the few changes that we've made for REST spec and things like that were minor, like the votes just go through. I think there's general agreement. So it's only a problem if there is a disagreement about it, and that's what we want to highlight.
Okay, cool.
Unless anybody else has different thoughts or feels that that process is too cumbersome. I don't feel it's been that way, but
yeah, I as I said, I don't take objection from doing this. I was just going to do it on the main thread for this PR, just be like before we merged it, send out an email and say like this is the addendum that we're also including in here, heads up. But either way, if we require it all being separate PRs as well, I think that is very little burden on doing something like this.
I don't mind it being in the same PR as long as like we're highlighting that it's there, I think.
Yeah, I think if it were in the same PR, that's fine, as long as we bring up a vote thread and say, hey, like we just want to do a quick vote to make sure everybody's aware of this, and then we thumb it up and everybody sees it.
Okay, and this I believe has both a spec change to the tables and a spec change to the REST catalog to enable.
It will require one. I think that's not in the PR, so it needs to add the REST bodies for the metadata update.
Yep.
Okay.
If that's the way it goes, yeah.
Okay.
And so far, this PR just has the property-based update.
Cool. Sounds good. Okay, then Iceberg metadata for variant shredding. I'll hand it off to Iowa.
Yeah. This is Iowa. Yeah, I'm sharing this proposal for variant shredding. This is basically in order to prune the files like by variant subcolumn. We need to we need to collect the metadata for variant subcolumns, similar as regular columns. Now, in order to collect all the metadata, for example, null value counts or other counts, that will introduce incompatibility across manifested versions. So the proposal is trying to take in 2 steps. The first step is to, like for lower bounds and upper bounds, the current data type is binary. So we're gonna target this these 2 metrics first. We're gonna collect subcolumn metrics in a variant, and then save in a binary. So with that, we don't introduce a manifest version incompatibility, but later we're gonna try to propose the full metrics proposal. So if you have any comments, please leave in the doc. Yeah, please help take a look at that. So I guess this is critical for variant shredding support to prune unnecessary files. Yeah, that's basically it.
So the initial proposal you're saying is to propose that for a variant column, we have a variant with lower bounds or upper bounds.
Yeah.
For each field in the variant, right?
Yeah.
Or I suppose if, okay. So with fields in the variant. Now, you mentioned the long-term plan is different. Can you talk a little bit more?
Yeah, long-term plan. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, long-term plan is for, let's say for null counts, right? We're probably gonna also, right now it's a long type. We can also change to variant type as well. And then have subfield or subcolumn metrics inside that variant.
Okay, so I think the main thing is for now we're saying like because we can only represent a variant in the lower and upper bounds, we're going to cover those cases, but you'll have to basically say it's unknown for a number of nulls.
That's right.
I think that's a pretty reasonable approach for now.
Okay, yeah, it's kind of like trade-off. It's a trade-off.
Yeah. I think the main thing is not speeding up the is null queries. We don't expect those to be all that great, but like really taking care of the lower and upper bounds. I think that's where we're going to get the most value out of column stats for variant.
Yeah, that's right.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah,
sounds good. Yeah, please take a look. Yeah, thank you.
This would translate into spec changes that say for a variant column, the lower bounds or upper bounds value is itself a variant. I'm curious one small detail if this isn't going too far. If it's going too far into the weeds, let me know. But what is the plan for metadata?
Currently, we were thinking we would just concatenate the 2 fields because you should be able to read both based on their own internal metadata. So you can essentially just say like read metadata, and then whatever left you have in that byte array should be value.
Okay.
That's right.
But that's in the spec or in the proposal if you want to see.
Yeah, it's also in the spec. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I was expecting. It's not great because we have to basically store all the metadata for every single field every single time, right? Like, because the metadata, for anyone who's unfamiliar, the metadata is basically a dictionary, and so we would be storing for every lower bound and every upper bound, every field name that has a lower and upper bound.
Yeah,
That's true. Yeah.
I think we talked about this before, but like if we don't have other kind of name mapping embedded somewhere, like I don't know how we get around that.
Yeah, it's something to think about whether we want to do that.
So I have a little bit of a concern. I don't know if you've looked into what this means for the size of the stats field, because, you know, if we're talking about encoding the metadata, that includes the key value in this dictionary. It also includes what the values are. We don't have necessarily a way to truncate those in any meaningful way. And so if you're taking an arbitrary JSON payload and you're saying, hey, what are the maxes of all the fields, you know, all of the union of all the fields in the stats.
I've
Like
actually
either
thought about that.
what?
I've thought about that, and what I was thinking is that you would only keep the stats for the shredded fields.
Is that what the proposal?
Yeah.
We wouldn't have stats for anything else.
Yeah, because you would have to basically go and keep stats for every variant, and you know the structure of every variant.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that we have currently to even get stats is to basically read them from Parquet. So I think this would go and read the Parquet stats for these, you know, variant subfields and use those, so that we actually also know that, you know, those subfields have, you know,
Type representation
and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Daniel. I think basically what we were thinking is this is only for type values, and will you follow the exact same truncation rules and stuff that you would with any other typed column. It's just the container we're putting them in is slightly different. So you would have all the same like metadata problems you have with a super large table, but I don't know if we have a way around that.
I don't think so. Like I actually don't have a huge problem. I just want to call out that like that is a concern, because like we already know the stats are a little bit of a problem size wise in the metadata, but I think that there are ways that we can improve it. I don't think that that's something we want to tackle here, right?
Yeah, of course, you know, yeah, that's a comment about the size, manifest size. Let's say if you have a lot of variants and a lot of like shredded columns, right? Definitely, it's going to increase the size.
Yeah. And I wouldn't want to try and optimize for like truncation within that string columns or anything that like potentially you could do, but it's just like it really complicates the handling of the variant at that point and how we evaluate stats.
Another thing here is that we would not be able to even store the shredded stats if they can't be used. So we would need to go to the value column and ensure that the value column is all null in order to even propagate the stats from the typed value column, because you know if you have a non-null value in the value column, it removes your ability to use the typed value stats.
Yeah. So what I'm
Oh,
so
stats entirely, right?
Yeah.
For that threaded column.
Yeah. So basically, if there's a like different, like multiple types, then we will not save the stats.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to understand. So I think that we would have to have pretty good stats in order to store them here. So cool. Any other discussion on the variant and metadata stuff? It sounds like you guys have thought through basically everything, so it's just a matter of getting that probably reviewed. Okay. Next up, discussion about pluggable file formats.
So, hi everyone. I was thinking, seeing lately quite a high number of file formats cropping up, claiming that they are very good and very fast and whatnot. And and also I see that we have hard-coded values for file formats. And even when I was doing Hive integration, I was thinking about why we do that, and if there is an open if the community will be open for a suggestion to adding pluggable file formats. Probably they won't be that performant as the direct reads for Parquet or for ORC or the current versions, because they need some conversion there. But at least it would be possible to try out those, and if we see enough users, we can add these to the Iceberg core supported file formats. Also, there are some users who already has several files with different file formats. They would like to integrate it to the Iceberg, and for them it would be also good if they can provide the readers and the writers, they could plug in the Iceberg table formats.
So I have a couple thoughts here. We've had this suggestion in the past, and I think it's a good one. You know, we do need to think about how the format evolves when we add new file formats. You know, and when, because we don't want to just be tied to a single one or a small set. I think, first of all, like, what does it mean for compatibility across engines? Because right now we're seeing kind of an explosion in the number of implementations, even within the Apache community. You know, we've got Go, Rust, PyIceberg, the Java, and we're starting up the C++ language and implementation stuff, right? So 5 implementations there. You've also got proprietary implementations in at least 3 vendors that I know about, if not more. And so, you know, we're getting to a pretty wide surface area. And I want to make sure that we're not unnecessarily complicating, you know, the compatibility story across all of that. That said, we do need a way to test out, you know, these new file formats. The second sort of issue that I've seen with this is that we've said in the past, yes, we are totally open to someone coming and saying, hey, I want to, you know, make this a string in the, or sorry, make the metadata carry a custom string, be able to plug in my own readers and writers. But we've never seen an API, you know, submitted for actually doing that. So there is quite a bit of actual technical work here that hasn't yet been done. And then, you know, that might include, what is this format capable of? If you wanted to plug in JSON or CSV, those have very different implications for schema evolution, and we would need to plumb through disabling or, you know, saying, no, you can't do that. You know, there are some difficult implications. And then the last thing before I hand it off to Dan, who I know has thoughts on this too, is just that, you know, we also need to think through deprecating formats. I think we are potentially close to needing to deprecate a format because I'm not seeing a lot of maintenance work happening on Orc. And so I'm personally wondering, like, how many people out there are using Orc? Should we, you know, deprecate it and recommend that in, say, V4 or V5 forward, you know, Orc is no longer something that you can write to. What does that cycle look like? Because if we're adding formats, we should definitely be able to remove formats. So I think that's really just a parallel thing that we need to start thinking about and seeing what we want to do. I'll hand it off to Dan.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of things that Ryan said. I would say I do think we want to keep the the discussion open about new formats, especially as we are seeing like there are use cases where they perform really well. The same is true for Orc and Parquet. Like some do things better than others. Also true with Avro. I think it is non-trivial to add a format and actually get good support. And I think that that's a little understated just because of like all the things you have to do about collecting metrics, statistics, all the stuff that we've plumbed through. And even some of the features that we're adding now, like variant, make this quite a bit harder because the variant spec is actually in Parquet. And we currently don't even have a parallel proposal for Avro or Orc, and how we actually handle that specification, how we translate those to the other representations. There may be paths forward for that. There may be ways to just like show what the conversion is, but there's a lot of features, and like Ryan pointed out the Orc case, like right now we're missing things like default values, we're missing variant implementation. There's a number of things that are coming up where in order to actually have full support, there's a lot of investment that's needed. And what we want to probably see is that there is like adequate community investment, and we're intentional about those things, which is getting back to your question about, well, why do we have these things hard-coded? It's because we don't want to lead to a huge fragmentation of like, hey, this thing implements this one thing, but like either the format doesn't support this other thing, so we're not going to do that, or we're not going to collect statistics because we don't have the plumbing to do that. It just lends to a very bifurcated ecosystem. So I think we want to make sure that we have really good support for Iceberg and it doesn't devolve to kind of like piece and parts across different formats. Right, back to you, Ryan, I guess.
I just wanted to mention something really quick on variant. For variant, we don't think that shredding makes sense inside of Avro. Or I don't think, I shouldn't say wait. I don't think it makes sense inside of Avro because Avro is a row-oriented format. So you're probably not going to be able to get the column shredding benefits because it's not columnar. So our proposal for embedding variant in Avro is to have a tuple, which is the metadata and the value as binary fields. That's what we went with for Orc as well. So, Orc would basically not implement shredding until there was a, defined way to implement shredding in the Orc format, which could definitely, I would assume that it borrows heavily from Avro, but I so far haven't seen, either a push for native support or anything like that. So this is an area that I'm kind of watching for V3, where we are adding, new types and new default values and things like that. And, I think Orc has never been fully supported and maintained the way the other formats have been. And it's probably just through the number of companies using them. So I think it is something to watch out for. Oh yeah, that's right. Iceberg also doesn't support Orc. Like this is a pretty widespread issue that I think we should very carefully consider.
On the other hand, if we don't look through these things carefully, it would mean that we tie ourselves directly, absolutely, to a single file format, which is, I think, also could be an issue.
Oh yeah, I don't think that we should do that, and I totally agree with you that we should have, ways of building out support for new file formats and introducing them. Like if there is a way to test with these new file formats and get some idea of the performance benefits and everything, like I think that is definitely something that we should do. I would just say that we don't want to start adding formats without ways of identifying and removing formats.
I just actually want to call out, there was a thread that I started in the dev list a little while ago about adding Parquet to core. And part of that was like some of these metadata related things, ways that we possibly wanted to use, the file formats more natively in, metadata representation and things like that. But that also highlighted that maybe we do need a good interface between like what we're using in core and the underlying formats. And so if we can introduce, like we have kept K and org separate, exploration into these other formats, like we can have a path of like trying to, build out all the necessary functionality and, keep that somewhat separate. But I think we still want to be intentional and not just leave it up to, hey, anybody can like go and implement their own thing in whatever library and then plug it in, and we start having these bifurcated like supported formats showing up in different places. So I think it's just about like, let's make sure that it's intentional. Let's make sure that we have a path for doing that and we have the right abstractions in place in order to support it. But I don't think that we're saying like, hey, let's not do it.
Well, so actually, Dan, I think I have a slightly different perspective there on unsupported formats. I think there is, and we've heard from people in the past that there's value in things like putting JSON or CSV inside of an Iceberg table. For one thing, it would allow you to move off of, say the Hive metastore, as long as you limited and, didn't allow certain operations. Right. And so there are ways of using the Iceberg core and file tracking, even DVs and delete file capabilities with those other formats. I think what we would want to do is make sure that we have a very well-defined surface area to say like, hey, you can plug in a format this way, but there's zero expectation that whatever you plugged in is going to support, the full range of things that the table supports, as well as there's no expectation that, say, some commercial database is going to be able to read that data. Sorry, Ken.
Yeah, I wanted to mention what you just talked about in the last point, actually, in terms of supportability. I think it really depends on like your definition of like, is it supporting all of the features that comes with Iceberg, or is it more of a horizontal, like, I can, drop in, replace CSVs, JSONs as a file, like data file encoding, right? And there's some benefits with that, especially with the REST spec and the Iceberg spec. Like, I guess in my mind, if you were to, limit as much features as possible to like the bare minimum of what an Iceberg table is, even with the REST spec, that's a really good like data delivery method in a way, right? If I have like, some JSON files, some CSV files, I can call it Iceberg, right? But it comes with the rest of the ecosystem. It might not have like, shredding or stats or this and that, but hey, at least, I can read it, right? So that's probably like another side of the story, is to say, like, the supportability means the full feature supportability, or it just means that, hey, at least if I point it at my CSV file, S3 bucket somewhere, that works.
I think that's an open question for me, at least, because it's like, how much work is it to turn off certain table features, right? Like currently, we don't check, do I have a CSV file in this table when we do things like schema evolution. Those two things are completely independent. And like, we always know how to handle some older data file, making assumptions about how that schema has evolved over time. So there are things where, would we have to turn off schema evolution entirely? That's ugly. Or would we, in the end, want to define a different way of evolving schemas where maybe renames aren't possible renames are possible in CSV, and adding columns to the end are possible, but like it gets ugly really quick, and implementing all of those, and not only that, but speccing it out. So like I think what we would have is possibly a, you know, unknown format or degenerate format that can be, you know, implemented by any reader, but like has just simple and hard implications for what you can do in the table.
What if we separate in reading and writing? That's I think it's a quite big difference, and it could limit the scope of the task for quite a bit if we just focus on reading.
So I'm not convinced that that works. Like your readers and writers have to be coordinated, and right now they're coordinated through a way of evolving schemas, right? There's also no such thing as an iceberg table where you don't write, I guess. I mean, you could say like we're gonna, you know, put the responsibility of producing correct data on some external system and then, you know, document the requirements for when you can add files or whatever. But I don't really see that as a solution to the problem. That's just moving that complexity outside of Iceberg, which isn't great, right? Then you're introducing risk because people do all the dumb things that they could do in Hive.
And my concern about like the open pluggability though is like it leads to almost necessarily fragmentation, because like even if you look at where orc is right now, I posted in there like the wonderful status page that somebody created in the docs. You can see that we can't use that in any of the other languages currently. And so if somebody comes along and implements like this new format, like there may not be any intentionality about like, oh, I'm going to go and like support this in Rust, I'm going to support this in Go. If there isn't a big enough community, if there isn't like general alignment on it, then we get a bunch of different things that are like language bound, you know, data sets that are bound to a specific language, can't be consumed by other things. I think we need to have more conversation about like where we want to take this, because I see it leading to a lot of fragmentation. I do think that there's potential for supporting some of the read features for things like JSON and CSV. I'm not sure that we would support writing to those, but you know, there may be value in reading them. I think there's a lot more discussion that needs to go on in terms of like just the, you know, how does this fit into the ecosystem with like introducing lots of different formats.
Thanks for all the input. That was I was asking here.
It's a great idea, and I think if you want to move forward with it, like let's figure out a way to make it happen. That said, it is a very complex problem, and I'm gonna throw, you know, org support under the bus to get that done at the same time. Like, yeah. By the way, I mentioned earlier there are you know, ways to get involved. You know, if you want org support, that's another good way to get involved. I would say, like, don't pick up those PRs simply because you want to do something. There are more valuable ways to contribute. But like, if work is important to you, then the way to make it continuously a part of the project is to contribute there. All right, and we are at time. I know there was one more issue about the snapshot summary fields. The vote is out. I think we're all aligned around like adding it to the spec. I threw a wrench in at the last minute and said, hey, why is this not in the main body of the spec, since these things are defining requirements? But I think we can probably take care of that through offline discussion, or maybe just stay on another couple minutes. Up to you guys. Thank you for coming, everyone.
Yeah, hi. And so, yeah, so I put that there. So just to take you a couple of minutes. The general question is that I want to learn more about what's the like general requirements of putting things in the appendix or in the main body. For this snapshot summary of optional fields, I think the value of making that in an appendix is that it can help like to do less distractions in the main body, because it do makes a very long list of the optional metrics, but we only want to make that as a reference or like a recommendation. So maybe like as too much stuff in the main body. So finally, like I think we choose to make that in appendix. But
cool. Like right now, I think what's happening is we're evolving the spec quite a bit, and we're not necessarily figuring out where things should go. We're sticking them in places that are convenient. So like I just want to make sure that we are considering what is the most natural place for this, and does it really require its own separate section or appendix. I would say, we've been hitting this with the geotypes quite a bit, where there's going to be a geo appendix, which I think is good. This seems like something that's like, do we really want a separate appendix for it? So I would say, like, what makes the most sense to me, and I debated this too, is either in the main body in the snapshot summary section to say like, hey, here are things that you can put in the snapshot summary. Or if it is purely a recommendation and an implementation detail, then I would put it in the section that we already have on, or the appendix we already have on implementation specific details. Just another section in there that says, hey, these are conventions used by implementations, and those conventions are that these are the snapshot summary fields that we produce. I think that would be another reasonable place without creating like a separate appendix for this. That way, if you're going and saying like, okay, where are all the additional things I need to know, right? You go to the implementation notes section or appendix to the spec.
I think that makes sense, because please go ahead.
I was just gonna call out, like, does anyone else have an opinion here? Like Faco, Russell, Moog, Kevin, like Peter, you've got a bunch of PMC and committers here. So, well, I mean, you're well, so
I wish Daniel is still here, because he and I had the same comment, I think, in different places when we saw the original, because we had it embedded in that same section, and we're like, since this is optional, like maybe we shouldn't have it documented there. And I think that's why we wanted it down to the appendix, because we're like, no one actually has to do any of these. But I think implementation details is fine too. I don't have strong feelings about this.
I just, we're already on Appendix G. So
they probably have to make that as an subsection in the implementation details. That's still in the appendix.
That sounds good to me. Something I think we really need to like stress over too much, but I just, I want to try and as much as possible make sure that the spec is still readable.
I won't be satisfied till we have double letter appendixes. So,
I mean, do you go to double letter? Or do you start using Greek letters?
I'm excited to find out. So we've got 20 more to add.
Or just non-printable characters. Keep going through ASCII, like uppercase letters. And numbers. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.